Hardly 24 hours after John Henry officially took ownership of the Boston Globe, he published an open letter to readers explaining his motivations for wanting to buy the paper. But maybe as noteworthy as what he said is what he didn't say.
Over the past few months, John Henry has been coy about his plans for the Boston Globe.
Any reaction to what you saw?
A little early.
But after Henry closed on his $70 million purchase, he published a 2,800-word open letter, Why I Bought the Globe. While admitting there's no clear business model, Henry says he believes deeply in the future of this great community, and the Globe should play a vital role in determining that future. George Donnelly, executive editor of the Boston Business Journal, says Henry said a lot of the right things, but
given that he took so much space and spent so much time on this op-ed, I was surprised by some of the things he didn't say, in particular the conflict he has with owning two of the biggest brands in New England.
And, says Donnelly, the potential conflict of owning both the Globe and the Boston Red Sox is something Henry should have addressed.
I don't think it's an issue that goes without saying. I think it's an opportunity to restate that, that the sports department and the paper in general has an ongoing issue and an ongoing conflict that they have to deal with.
Donnelly also noted that while Henry called for higher standards at the paper, he didn't talk about how that would happen.
I think that's a little bit of a contradiction. It's hard to talk about raising standards and without, in some ways, talking a little bit about resources as well. That's a particularly important issue, given that the Globe has, been cutting, and they have an ongoing cost-cutting program.
The Red Sox are world champions.
But Donnelly agrees with this bottom line. If John Henry can do for the Globe what he's done for the Red Sox, he'll be a hero.
We should point out that when we were talking to George Donnelly from the Boston Business Bureau, Business Journal, he mostly said really positive things about John Henry's open letter. It was very long. It was 2,800 words. It was rather daunting, but impressive. It was.
Very long.
It was impressive, but I had this same reaction when I was reading it. My guess was, with no proof, that he wrote that his wife, Linda Pizzuti, who's also got journalistic instincts, read it over, they edited it together, and he turned it in. That he didn't intentionally not address the potential conflict of interest, but it didn't kind of come up. I mean, he was really so focused on the significance of making this purchase that the Red Sox weren't on his mind. That's my guess.
I think that's a very good guess, absolutely. And I thought it was a very good letter. He said some things about paid content that were a little bit retro, I thought, but for the most part, it was a good forward-looking statement. I think the other big thing he left out, and again, maybe it just never occurred to him, he also bought the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, and he did not say a word about them. And people out in Worcester are really squirming over this. I talked to a couple of people this week about it. It will be interesting to see if maybe this Sunday there's an op-ed about from John Henry in the in the Sunday Telegram about his deep and abiding passion for all things Worcester.
Well, Dan Shaughnessy, every time he's asked now, the great sports columnist at the Globe, every time he's asked now about John Henry, he says, always the greatest human being ever. He's always covering all his bases. It was very long, unless you're writing about some sex story or something. 2,800 words is really long. But, I've been a newspaper person all my life, and newspapers obviously are in big trouble. And you have to, I think it's really exciting, Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, John Henry there, trying to think out of the box. At the Herald, Joe Shaka, my boss, we have an internet radio station now. We have internet stuff, programming, videos, et cetera, all this. We need to find a way, as Henry pointed out in his piece, the business model is broken for newspapers, and we've got to figure out a different way to do it. So as much out-of-the-box thinking, as much experimentation, someone's going to figure it out, and then everyone can copy what they do. And I'm hoping that that this could, a bunch of creative people getting together can solve the problem with newspapers, because people are reading them online. They're not reading them in the
You make a good
edition.
point, because both Jeff Bezos from Amazon and John Henry have the resources.
They do have the resources
to see how this plays out.
How you make money online.
Yeah.
which is why I think he should have mentioned resources in his 2800. You know, listen, he was writing not just for this moment, but actually this is an archival piece instantly, the moment he wrote it. So we'll be looking back on this no matter what happens with the Globe in the future to see what he said at this moment about why he purchased it. But given that we know the number one thing that's at issue while we talk about broken business models is resources, why not frame it and say, this is really not a piece about resources. I am committed in this moment to putting the resources in as I see fit until such time that I'm convinced otherwise. Now, let me tell you the rest of the stuff. I think that was the correct frame, and not to have it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. In the same way that you don't, get mentioned that you didn't mention the Worcester Telegram. When ABC News 100 years ago bought Capital Cities, I was there. They never mentioned the news department. Not one word. ESPN, sports. We, the whole community, cast members, blah, blah, blah. We're sitting there going, you just need to mention some things up front.
I mean, one of the real benefits of having, being the subject of one of these billionaire takeovers of newspapers is that you're able to step out of the public limelight a little bit. One reason why newspaper companies have had trouble is because the ones that are publicly traded have had to hit quarterly earnings totals.
That's right.
That means that you have to stay just ahead with the cuts of where the revenue declines are. And one of the benefits of going private is that he can say, we're going to do what we need to do over the next 5 years with the hopes that that's the time frame, not the next 3 months. There are a few things in the letter that I thought were particularly compelling. One, you sort of touched on that he sees the Globe as a laboratory to find out models that can be spread elsewhere. I think that's a very valuable thing. There are 1,400 daily newspapers in this country, and it's very useful that what works in Boston can work just as well in Seattle, and they're not competing with each other.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. The other piece is that he really showed that he's going to be an active, engaged owner. Jeff Bezos has tons of good ideas and is a brilliant businessman and brilliant online thinker of how to do things on the internet, but I don't get the impression he's going to be engaged in the day-to-day workings of the Washington Post. Whereas I think John Henry really views that differently. He's going to be engaged.
I think he will be too.